He hasn't even announced he's running, but former Vice President Joe Biden's 2020 campaign is already fending off attacks over these allegations.
Very unexpectedly and out of nowhere, I feel Joe Biden put his hands on my shoulders, get up very close to me from behind, lean in, smell my hair, and then plant a slow kiss on the top of my head.
That's Lucy Flores, a former Nevada State Assemblywoman, said Vice President Biden was standing behind her in line backstage at a campaign event when she was running for lieutenant governor when it all happened.
I was just shocked. I felt powerless. You don't expect that kind of intimacy from someone so powerful and someone who you just have no relationship whatsoever to touch you and to feel you and to be so close to you in that way.
Flores first made these allegations in New York Magazine's The Cut on Friday. Since then, the Biden team has responded with 3 statements, 2 from representatives, 1 from the former VP himself. He said, "In my many years on the campaign trail and in public life, I've offered countless handshakes, hugs, expressions of affection, support, and comfort. Not once, never, did I believe I acted inappropriately. If it is suggested I did so, I will listen respectfully, but it was never my intention." Biden also added, "I may be surprised at what I hear, but we've arrived at an important time when women feel they can and should relate their experiences, and men should pay attention, and I will." Of course, it is being suggested he acted inappropriately, and it's not the first time Biden's been called out for violating personal space. He's been criticized for getting too close to people on a number of occasions, though some of them, including Stephanie Carter, she's the wife of former Defense Secretary Ash Carter, have been coming to his defense. As for Biden's response to her allegations, Lucy Flores isn't buying it.
If he is saying that he never believed that was inappropriate, then frankly, I think that's a little bit of a disconnect.
Anita Hill seems to believe that, too, as Biden faces criticism over the Clarence Thomas hearings. Former senior campaign advisor to Vice President Biden, Alethea Harney, also former press secretary for Senator Elizabeth Warren's Senate campaign, joins me now. It's good to see you. Thanks for being here. Along with Jen Deaderick, author of She the People, an illustrated history of women's citizenship. Good to see you. So what should the consequences be, Alethea, if any, of the behavior that Flores is describing?
Well, consequences, I don't know. I think this can be a learning moment, which I think is good. Do I wish that she'd come out this way instead of maybe telling him personally? Yes, but, you know, it kind of is what it is. What I think is important is that people know what kind of person he is. I think that goes along with it. And you know what? He's a close talker. I used to love telling people. So I also did advance on the Kerry Edwards campaign, and I often did a lot of advance work for John Edwards. Now, we know a lot more about John Edwards, so it's not as fun to tell people, but I used to love to compare the two prior to rallies. So John Edwards was someone you didn't talk to. He kind of was getting his hair ready, you know, he was very serious, so you didn't even talk to him. Joe Biden, on the other hand, you had to almost push onto stage because he'd want to catch up with you and hear about you and how your parents were doing and what was the latest, what was on your mind.
Did he ever touch you as a staff person like Flores was describing?
So he never smelt my hair, but he certainly, I mean, he's a close talker. Certainly you have friends like that.
You know, I've spoken to a bunch of people who have either worked for Biden or are big-time supporters. There seems to be unanimity, even if they're critical of this moment, that there was no intent to do something that would make her uncomfortable. Does that matter, or is the only thing that matters is that Flores, and I assume some other women in the past, have been uncomfortable?
Well, there's some, I mean, intention, of course, always matters, but I think this also reflects, all of the incidents sound they're very paternalistic, and like, I'm a loving dad, let me comfort you, let me give you a hug, let me give you a kiss on the head, but also is inappropriate when it's a congresswoman, you know, and I think, and it's also, Rebecca Traister wrote a really great piece where she parallels some of this with some of his policy positions over the years in terms of, you know, his anti-abortion stance and not necessarily believing women could make the choice themselves or, worrying about women being angry about things.
And she thinks this is an extension of that?
She thinks, not that this is an extension of it, but that it reflects a greater, that not fully taking Anita Hill seriously, not wanting to, that it's very old school.
I want to get to Anita Hill in a second. Just one more thing about this. His press person this afternoon said something that I thought was so pathetically stupid, saying, this is Biden's, it's a cottage industry of lies. It's led by right-wing trolls. I'm one of the right-wing trolls, by the way. I didn't know that Stephanie Carter,
apparently,
until today, said it didn't bother her, which is relevant but not determinative. I didn't know that Senator Coons' daughter allegedly was perfectly comfortable. But the fact that some are comfortable, if some aren't, that is really what the determining factor should be.
Right, and I think that statement actually takes away from the vice president's statement, right? Which is what he said was
statement.
Right.
No, his original this statement takes away from it. He's like, wait, guys, slow down here.
And I think he's a good guy. I like Joe Biden, but I was saying, I'll always love Frank Sinatra, but I don't think Frank Sinatra was always appropriate with women, and I don't think he'd necessarily, if he were alive, be the right person.
But is he not to a degree? I'm sorry, what?
Well, I just don't think it's fair to say Joe Biden isn't good to women.
I don't. I think he's not. I think he's not a bad person to women.
Well, no, I think he's got above and beyond. If you were to ask him what he's most proud of, he'll say his work on the Violence Against Women Act.
But it's widely thought that was a reaction to the criticism he got for the Anita Hill work.
No. He said this before.
And his anti-abortion
When I worked for him in Iowa, one of my roles amongst many, because we didn't have a lot of money then, we didn't have a lot of staff, was to do constituency outreach. And one of the things that was very important to him was to meet with the heads of battered women's shelters.
I think it's a genuine concern for him, but I think that it's a protectionist concern.
You twice mentioned Anita Hill. Last year, she was asked in November if he had ever apologized to her. And here's what she said. This is for the Clarence Thomas hearing. He said he apologized, but he hasn't apologized to me, said Hill. The statute of limitations has run on an apology. I don't need an apology. And then just last week in New York, Joe Biden said the following about Anita Hill and the Clarence Thomas hearings. Here's the vice president.
I wish I could have done something. To this day, I regret I couldn't come up with a way to get her the kind of hearing she deserved.
Yeah, I have to say, that put me totally over the edge. I wish I could have done something. He was the chair of the committee. There are 3 women who were ready to corroborate, from what we understand from Jane Mayer and Jill Abramson's writing, ready to corroborate the testimony of Anita Hill and maybe tip the scales on Clarence Thomas. Isn't that avoiding responsibility?
Yes.
It is a little bit, and I think if you're to ask him about it again, and I haven't seen a reporter do that, that he would clarify.
After that.
Right. But this was just, 2 weeks ago, right?
So if someone were to follow up and say, but that was a different time. How did we all react to Anita Hill at that time?
By the way, is that relevant? Margie Egan and I were talking on the radio the other day about the racist, horrible things our fathers said, and whether we should have said something to them when we were little kids, as opposed to if a relative said them now, where we like to think we would. Is it relevant? Some of these things with Biden are more current events.
Some of it was that people weren't totally taking it seriously yet. However, sexual harassment had been an issue for a couple of decades at that point. And the fact is, he was in charge of the hearing. There were 3 other women who could corroborate, and he didn't. And one of his rationales was that he had promised one of his colleagues in the locker room at the Senate that he would have a speedy hearing for Thomas. So and it was still all these white guys lined up, and there were choices he made that he could have made differently. And it says, he also keeps saying, I think I owe Anita Hill an apology. But he doesn't actually say he's sorry.
We on the radio, we talked about this today, too, also with Marjorie Egan. And we had some people, including a woman, by the way, who he did this to when she was 25. And she said, I was upset until he talked to me head to head. And I can't tell you how empathetic he was and how much it meant to me. So obviously, everybody reacts differently. However, some people also went on to say, how can you ever criticize this guy when there's a guy in the White House who is credibly accused of assaulting or inappropriately touching 14 women, made the infamous Access Hollywood thing. Is that not relevant?
No, of course it's relevant, but it's also saying, how can you judge this guy who killed one person when someone else killed 20
people? But some people are saying he should pull out of the race.
Or how can you
should he pull out of the race because of Anita Hill and because of...
I don't know if he should put out of the race. I would say, he's not in the race officially yet. But I also think...
He's got to get in before he pulls out, right?
I would say it's, for me, also the optics of, here we have this slate of historic candidates. We have more women running for president than we've ever had before. We have people of color color. Some of them are the women, and we have an openly gay man running for president. For an older white guy who's sort of problematic and a little old school, who's beloved,
Let
but
the voters reject him. You know,
Right,
you have only,
exactly.
you're an advisor to Warren, to him. If he
Yeah.
were sitting here right now, just the two of you, what would you tell him to do? We have 30 seconds.
Well, I would tell him he probably should say something to her, right? He should
We're
say
talking
something
about
to
Hill.
Flores.
Oh, to Flores.
And Hill.
He's got a lot of calls to make, doesn't
Well, but I think 2 calls. I think it's. I mean, there's so many things that he's done. I mean,
no, he's a good guy. It's just
15
he's also,
seconds.
you know, I mean, there's so many other really good people. Right, I'm
But
sorry,
I-
if he can run if he wants, but
the fact of the matter is it isn't fair to discount him, though, because he is old and white. He's someone who has a career that would make him. Listen, at
Yeah.
the end of the day, I want to support who's going to resonate with the people in middle America who voted for Trump last time
They're
and
not gonna
voted
vote
for
for-
Obama before that.
No,
and
but Can I
tell you-
that's who we need
When
to
it
support
comes
as
to
a
TV
candidate.
hosts,
We're
old
not
and
gonna
white
find
is
a-
excellent. Let me just tell you.
Oh, yeah, no,
nice to
obviously.
see you, Jen. Alethea, it's great to see you. Thanks so much
see
for
you, too.
coming. Appreciate it.